Iran striking back. While critics say the Iranian nuclear deal unlocked billions of dollars for the regime in Tehran, they have now slapped sanctions on us, hitting 15 American companies, which Iran claims support terrorism. The firms include ITT, Raytheon, even truck maker Oshkosh, and can you believe this? The real estate company Remax. This after the U.S. announced its latest sanctions on Iran last month. And now Iranian President Hassan Rouhani is set to visit Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow on Tuesday. That means both nations are further cementing ties between Tehran and Moscow. So how worried should we be? John Bolton is a former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, a Fox News contributor and chairman of the Gatestone Institute here in New York. So, Ambassador, what about this partnership between Putin and Rouhani? It seems it's only escalating and that they're getting closer.
Well, I think Russia and Iran have been acting very closely together in the Middle East for the last 10 or more years. Certainly, Russia has repeatedly given political cover to Iran's nuclear weapons program through multiple encounters in the UN Security Council and more broadly. They've worked very closely together to support their mutual ally, the Assad regime in Syria. In fact, I think it's pretty clear that if it weren't for Russia and Iran, and Hezbollah, the Shiite terrorist group in Lebanon, basically supported by Iran, that Assad would have fallen years ago. So I think this meeting really underlines the strength of the relationship that already exists. There are other possible areas of cooperation here, both Russia and Iran, big oil and gas exporters. I think in many ways Russia would love to find a way to get together with OPEC, or at least parts of OPEC, so that they could collude together in when to restrict production and raise international oil prices. They've got a lot to talk about, and I think the center of the conversation is how to continue to minimize American influence in the Middle East.
Minimize American influence in the Middle East. Look, Russia is using an Iranian airbase in Syria. Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, was in Moscow the other week trying to rein in the Iranian proxies and the Iranian forces in Syria. Did it work? Will it work? Is Putin listening? While Hezbollah, as you know, tens of thousands of missiles on the Israeli border.
Right, and that's why, for example, just within the past couple of weeks, Israel has struck again inside Syria to prevent further weapons transfers to Hezbollah in Lebanon. From Israel's point of view, the growth of Russian influence is nothing if not very troubling and destabilizing. Look, our policy, U.S. policy in Israel for 50 years has been to keep Moscow as minimally involved in the Middle East as possible. And under the Obama administration, Russia is now back selling weapons to Egypt. It has military advisors there it hasn't had since the mid-1970s. It now has a completely new air base at Latakia in Syria. As you mentioned, they're cooperating more closely with Iran than before. They've supplied Iran with the very sophisticated S-300 air defense system to protect Iran's nuclear program from an Israeli strike. I mean, this cooperation is broadening and deepening in many, many respects. And I think it's one reason why it will be difficult, if not impossible, for the United States to cooperate with Russia on counterterrorism measures, because Iran, as you know, is the central banker of international terrorism. It finances and arms Islamic terrorisms, whether they're Sunni or Shia, and really is at the heart of a terrorist network around the world.
It is still on the #1 on the state sponsor list of state sponsors of terrorism. Finally, Ambassador, what should the Trump administration do? Clearly, Vladimir Putin is expanding his reach in the Middle East at our expense.
Well, I think we ought to make it very clear that we're not going to accept that, and we're certainly not going to accept an enhanced role for Iran in the region. That's why, #1, as the Pentagon reviews the military options to destroy ISIS in Syria and Iraq, it ought to do so in a way that rolls ISIS up as quickly as possible, but which minimizes the upside for Iran. Obviously, in any multi-party conflict like this, eliminating one party, eliminating ISIS, will benefit everybody else. But we ought to try and do this in a way that benefits Iran as little as possible, because the next conflict is already underway. You can ask the Gulf Arabs, Egypt, Jordan, you can ask the Israelis. They see Iran as the principal threat, and we should too.
Iran is the principal threat, says John Bolton. Ambassador, thank you for your insight today. As always, good to see you.
Thank you, Eric.
Of course.